So I get questions from people all the time. In fact, every day I'm answering questions. So what I thought I'd do in this video is take 5 of your questions, give you 5 of my answers in about 15 minutes or less. So let's get into this and answer some basic questions. And this is going to be volume 1. We're going to probably do this again. So if you've got more questions you want me to answer, then leave them in the description below or in the comment section below, and I'll try and include those in a future video doing questions and answers like that. So let's get into it. A common question we get from people who do not know Greek is, can't we just do a one-to-one translation from Greek to English? And I want to address this because there's some real issues with trying to do this. One is the assumption that such questions bring with them. That is to say that the difference between Greek and English is really just the difference of we use one word here and we use a different word here. So if we can match those two words together and see this word goes with this word, then it's just going to make sense and it's going to work. Well, let me show you why that doesn't really, at least always work. Let me jump into Logos Bible Software and we'll talk about it. So here we are in the New American Standard Bible. Okay, now I've turned off a bunch of things. Now this is just an English translation, but this gives us a good opportunity to take a look at how Logos Bible Software can help us with the interlinear. So there is an actual interlinear tool that we can take advantage of here in Logos Bible Software. So if I click this button just here, you can see that it turns on the interlinear. Now, what I've done here is I've gone through and I've got the surface and manuscript, so you can see the original Greek manuscript. This is the text that you'll find in the Greek of the New Testament, and surface is essentially the English translation. Now, the next thing I want to do here is I'm going to turn on some parallel versions. And what I've done here is I've come down here, I've typed in ESV in this case, but I've actually connected the UBS, which is our Greek New Testament, and the English Standard Version together. So you can see the English Standard Version over here, and you can see it with the Greek text underneath, New American Standard here, and the actual Greek in the middle right here. Okay. So having seen that, then we're here in Ephesians chapter 2. And what I want to show you, a couple of things here. First of all, let's look at this little piece here, in your trespasses. And you'll notice here that you've got kai humas on tas nekros. Now, nekros, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. This is giving you the word order. Then in, right, this is actually part of the 5th word, but here we've inserted the 10th word in the Greek manuscript into the place of the 5th word. Okay, so we've swapped the order. So if we come over to the Greek New Testament, here's humon, right? Humon is highlighted here, it's highlighted here. It's the last word in the verse in Greek, right? But here in the New American Standard, it's the 5th word, or 6th word, essentially after in. And notice here in the English Standard Version, humon is not even translated. It's completely left out of the translation. So even if we were to take an interlinear like this and see a one-to-one correlation between the words, you're going to see words that are just missing and dropped out in different places as well. So the English Standard Version here, you are dead in the trespasses, and notice here, and you are dead in your trespasses and sins. And notice here, tois, this tois just here, this is translated here with the word the, but it's not translated in the New American Standard at all. So translators end up making decisions for you about which words do you need to see and which ones should be translated and how should they be translated. And so what you're going to find is there's not always a one-to-one correlation between these words. Another example here in which you formerly walked, right? Now you can see here 1, 2, and then we skip to the 4th word, then the 3rd word occurs, then the 4th word occurs again. And we can see here that then in which once you walked, right? So if you formerly walked, or you once walked, which is what the English Standard Version does here, in which you once walked, that works well in English, but in Greek, you once walked, in which once you walked is a little bit wooden in English, right? And so taking the exact word order of Greek here and trying to put it into English leaves it a little bit more difficult to read. And so one of the things that we just find here is that the word order and the way translators decide to translate the text is not to try and keep a one-to-one ordering of the words, but to make it so it's readable. And that means then that words are often out of order. And not only that, but one Greek word can often lead to multiple English words. So here, for instance, you and walked is all part of this one word, peripatesate here, in this, which is the fourth word in the Greek text here. Okay, so this one word here has two words in English. So you can't get a one-to-one correlation with this because there can be several words often translated for one Greek word. And it could be a verb and it could be a noun, it doesn't really matter. You also notice here that word order is different. I mentioned that earlier on. Another thing that we find out here is that there's a lot of texture that's missing in the English version of the Greek New Testament as well. For instance, look at this word in English here, were. This is just a simple English past tense verb. But this is actually a stative participle, right? This participle then is not a main verb, although this English version of it makes you think that it is a main verb. You were dead, right? That just sounds like a simple statement and it's not dependent on anything, and you can just say that. But all of verses 1 through 3 here, all of this is really setting up background information, if you like, to the main verb, which actually doesn't even appear until we get to here in verse 5. So in other words, the main verb here is he made you alive together with Christ. And you can see again here in verse 5, if we go down here, he made us alive. You know, you can see here together with all of these words here are all built into this one Greek word here. And again, you just can't tell what is the main verb in English because English renders it completely different to how the Greek renders it. So there's just so much lost in Greek. Not that these are bad translations, they're good translations, but it's just you can't translate and bring all of the texture of Greek into English. And so doing a one-to-one rendering, the best you get is an interlinear, and you can see how an interlinear still leaves a lot to be desired. And in fact, one of the biggest challenges, and one of the reasons I don't tend to recommend interlinear Bibles, is that they make people who use them think they know more Greek than they do. And that lulls them into this false sense of security that, well, the Bible says this, the Greek says such and such. And really, there's actually a lot more going on in the Greek text than what a translation can actually bring out. So these kinds of things, there's just no substitute for learning the original languages. And if you would like to learn the original languages, we would love to serve you as you go ahead and do that. So go to bma.to/starterpack and download the free starter pack to get a roadmap to what it looks like to learn to read the New Testament, and a bunch of other little free tools that we give you in that as well to get you on your way. So bma.to/starterpack. Let's go on to the second question. This question came up in a Facebook comment recently. It says, I think that the Greek language the way we teach it needs to be simplified. I said, well, what do you mean by that? And this person said, well, we need to take out these words like declension and paradigms and things like that. The problem is that whenever you get into any domain of knowledge, you're going to find that there are certain words that are used in that realm, whatever it happens to be, that are going to be, you're going to have to learn in order to learn the concepts that come with that order of knowledge. I mean, just take YouTube here, for instance. On YouTube, they have jargon. You might not have noticed this, but for instance, if I say, like this video, that means something very specific on YouTube that it might not mean in the real world, right? YouTube also has what's called an algorithm, right? Another piece of jargon, which is essentially a computer program which is plugged together with the like button so that when you hit the like button, the algorithm says, hey, people are finding this video helpful. And then when the job of the algorithm is to suggest videos for you to watch. So it prioritizes videos that are helpful to people, which it knows are helpful because people like them, and so it shows those videos. So all of this is just jargon and the way something works, and we use these terms to just capture these ideas very simply. So jargon is part of any realm of domain of knowledge, and you're going to have to get used to that. And the same is true of Greek as well. In Greek, though, some of the grammars, they do a good job, I think, of trying to explain how this works. Let's jump over and I'll show you a couple of grammars very briefly and how they actually go through and define these terms for you. So here we are in Mounce's Basics of Biblical Greek, the 4th edition, and you can see here in chapter 5, before you get into any grammatical terms, there's a whole chapter here that talks through some of these terms used in English grammar, but then other terms used in Greek grammar as well. And so I think Mounce does a pretty good job of trying to explain these, and you can come through here and you can look at the definitions for these, look at the definition of a declension, and so he does a good job, I think, of explaining what this means here. Here's Rodney Decker. He does exactly the same thing as well. And you can see when he starts into this chapter, he's going to go through, let's just skip on down to page 33 here, and you can see here he's going to go through Greek grammatical terminology like gender, number, case, declension, and so on. And so again, in each of these cases, the grammarians, they're doing a good job of trying to explain what these terms mean. Sometimes it may be a little bit too much, sometimes it's too little, but the reality is that if you're going to learn the language, you need to know these ideas, and these grammars do explain them along the way. So there's no shortcut for learning the jargon, but we try to introduce it little bit by little bit as you go in a way that hopefully isn't too overwhelming. Grammars do different jobs of this, and some of them are better than others. Some of them suit different people better than others, and so I recommend that you have two grammars on hand. One that's a little bit more complex, like these two I just showed you, and one that's a little bit simpler, like, say, Merkel and Plummer and beginning with New Testament Greek. So jargon is just one of those things you have to learn, and while we're at it, go ahead and use the jargon of the like button and the algorithmic paradigm to make sure other people can find this video. Thanks very much. The third question I wanted to answer then was, what resources should I buy? Believe it or not, I still get this question regularly, almost weekly, right? If not more often than that. So let me give you my quick set of references that I recommend. First of all, if you're in beginning Greek, I recommend you get Merkel and Plummer's Beginning with New Testament Greek. It's a good basic, and I think probably the best sort of basic beginning Greek available on the market today. So I recommend that. However, I do recommend that you get a more advanced grammar to go with it, and either Decker, Rodney Decker's Reading Koine Greek, or Bill Mounce's Basics of Biblical Greek 4th edition are good options. Personally, I would prefer Decker over Mounce, but that's just me. I think Decker is a better and more up-to-date and more cohesive approach to Greek, generally speaking, as well. Either of those is good though, so get two. Buy Merkel and Plummer for beginning with New Testament Greek, and then maybe Decker as a secondary grammar. When it comes to looking upwards, a lot of people say, well, what about a lexicon? If you're wanting something in paper, then Dunker's Concise Dictionary of, I think, Greek-English Dictionary. I'm going to leave a link to all of these in the description below, so if you want to find them, just go down there. But Dunker's Concise Dictionary from Greek to English is a really good print edition of a dictionary that you might want to grab a copy of if you're in beginning Greek. However, I always recommend BDAG, which is the big, Greek English lexicon. It's a little bit expensive. You can get it on sale for 80 bucks occasionally, so watch out for a sale. But if you don't have that, and I'll leave a link to that in the comment section below as well, it's mntg.me/bdag to get the Logos edition, which is what I recommend. And if you want to know how to use it, then I'll leave a link to a video up here that I did recently explaining how to use BDAG. Anyway, the other one you could look at is Little and Scott, or LAMP. Both of those are also available on Logos, and I typically recommend that you get most of your beginning Greek or most of your Greek resources on Logos, because otherwise you're not going to refer to them as much, particularly if you're looking to study the Bible and use Logos to do that. So that's a beginning Greek grammar and a basic lexicon to get started. Also, if you want a more advanced grammar, I thoroughly recommend Mathewson and Emmig's Intermediate Greek Grammar. This is easily the best grammar, in my opinion, for students wanting to get into more advanced grammar. It's straightforward, it's simple, it simplifies the language, and you don't get lost in verb categories and genitive categories and things like that. So this is a really good grammar, and if you wanted to go more advanced, then Wallace is a great supplement to go with that. But those are my recommendations. You'll find a link in the description below for each of those on both Logos and Amazon, so go grab a copy from down there. Another question I came across recently was, why are New Testaments, modern New Testaments, in lowercase when early manuscripts were all in uppercase? Well, that's a great question. The early texts that we have were indeed all written in uppercase, and they had no punctuation, no spaces, and a word would roll from one line onto the next line without, having to finish the word first. And the reason for this was really just to save space, right? Because there was parchment and vellum, and the things that they used to write these things were really expensive, and so they tried to, do the best they could with what they had, and so that's the way they did it. Beginning in the 9th century, scribes started to use minuscule, which is lowercase text, and there was a whole bunch of reasons why this is. First of all, it takes less room to write a word in lowercase than it does in uppercase. And so this became really popular, and it's also faster to write in lowercase than it is in uppercase. So this became really popular in the 9th century and led to, because it's now faster and takes up less space, the text that they were able to create took up less room. They were more easily able to be produced, and also you could actually put more in a book. So you could end up with smaller books, you could end up with books with, more in it, and so on and so forth. So it actually made a huge difference in history, because people prior to that time would get, say, the book of Romans or Ephesians or whatever it happened to be, and that may be all they get. But once minuscules came in, then it was much easier to get a huge variety of texts and put them all together in a single volume. And so it really allowed the text of the New Testament to be copied more freely and distributed more widely and owned and read by more people, and that made a big difference. So that's one of the reasons why today we just use regular capitalization that we use, and we can print small on text and so on, and that's the way it is today. The last question I want to address today is, what is the best book of the Bible to read first for a beginning Greek student? Well, this is an interesting question. First of all, because if you're a beginning Greek student, it's probably unrealistic to think that you could actually just jump into a book of the Bible, any book really, and just start reading. Now, there is a point at which, and normally that point is around the time you finish participles, that you can actually start to recognize and put together most of what you find in, say, the book of 1 John, which is the first book that I tend to recommend that people start with once they've finished beginning Greek. It is by far the easiest. There are still going to be some challenges in 1 John, such as with infinitives, maybe with subjunctives and things like that. But once you're through participles, for the most part, you should be able to follow what's in 1 John, and that would be the place to start. One of the reasons that 1 John is a great book once you finish beginning Greek is it's only got 90 words in it that occur less than 50 times in the New Testament, which means that if you put those into 3 blocks of 30 words, in 3 weeks, say, if you learn 30 words a week, you can be reading the entirety of 1 John. And that's the entire approach that I take with Biblical Mastery Academy, is we give you the vocabulary, then we get you reading that text, and you can reread that text, and then we move you on to the next text, but any words you've already learnt previously, we already take out for that next set of words. So you just have to learn the new words that occur there, and using this method, you're learning and going through the order we give you, you're learning to read a book of the Bible, of the New Testament, on average every 2 months. Some books much faster, some books a little slower, but on average, every 2 months, you're going to have the ability to read an entire Greek text that you wouldn't have had access to earlier. Now, if you want more information on this, I actually did a video on this quite a long time ago when I first started this channel, comparing the order of books that I recommend and use in Biblical Mastery Academy with the order you find in Dan Wallace's blog post that I've got a link to in that video, which I'll leave a link to up here, and also Greek for Life, which Rob Plummer and Benjamin Merkle wrote, which has its own order of books that it suggests. So I analyze the different orders and give you an idea of why I think the order that I give you is a little bit better than those two. Not that those two are bad or wrong. Watch the video, you'll find out why. So I hope this has been a helpful video. If you've got a question you want me to answer, then I would encourage you to drop it in the comment section below and leave it there. And what I'll do is in a month or two, I'll come back and maybe look at doing another set of these questions as well. If you found this helpful, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you want to learn more of Greek, go to bma.to/starterpack, download our free starter pack, which will give you a roadmap to mastery and a bunch of other little tools that we give you for free as well. So bma.to/roadmap, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Until then, keep taking small, consistent steps toward mastery. See you then.